Welcome to session 2. My name is Ken Ong. I worked with Carlo for 25 years, both in research and in clinical pediatrics. I first met Carlo in 1995 in Peru, not in South America, but in the Pediatric Endocrine Research Unit at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford. I remember coming into this open plan office, and there was Carlo sitting at the only computer in the office. Lynn Ahmed and Teresa Basu were sitting at their desks working on paper-based records. Those were the good old days of research. Amazingly, all that has been transformed these days with wonderful research facilities. This is the Clinical Research Centre in Cambridge, which actually comprises half a dozen clinical research facilities, overall led by Chris Chatterjee, and Carlo was the lead for pediatric studies for many years. And through that, complemented by his role and leadership on the Clinical Research Network, he helped to promote and encourage clinical research in very wide areas of pediatrics. Of course, with that move from Oxford to Cambridge, you've seen the change of office, and Carlo was very often found seated at his desk here up on level 8. Just to orientate you, I think I'm right in placing his office here in the corner up on level 8 of the C&D block of Addenbrooke's Hospital. Then more famously, if you're coming into the office from the inside, it's more easily recognizable by the sign on the door, which reflects his time where he shared that with David Dunger. And David, this is actually just completely in jest, nothing to do with your personalities at all.
Oh, no.
For many years, of course, he shared the office before that with Robert Tasker, where they spent many hours debating and discussing new ideas in teaching, education, and research, and were probably more akin to this Cambridge dynamic duo. And one of the research ideas which came out of that office was the protocol for the Cambridge Baby Growth Study. This study has now published over 35 papers, and you can read the cohort profile in the International Journal of Epidemiology. Carlo was the principal investigator, and but the study was initiated by an EU Framework 5 award jointly across Cambridge, Denmark, and Finland. Jan was the Cambridge awardee, and he'll speak later about the work of that study in terms of male reproductive development. But from early on, our co-investigators, Carlo, Jan, David Dunger, and myself, recognized this as a great opportunity to also study the developmental origins of health and disease. This idea that there are patterns of very early growth and weight gain that lead to obesity and early life risk factors for type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular disease. And in doing so, this followed on our earlier work started in Oxford, which had originally identified rapid or catch-up growth during the infancy period as an important risk factor for later obesity and childhood insulin resistance. And it's clear that infancy is a period of very rapid growth and weight gain. It did the fastest weight gain compared to any other period in life. There are also very large and very variable changes just in growth, but also in body composition and in the distribution of fat. And these have very plausibly relationships with later disease risks. However, in many birth cohorts until then hadn't adequately captured measurements to describe these very rapidly changing growth trajectories in weight, length, body composition, and fat distribution. And so from the output, the Cambridge Baby Growth Study protocol deliberately aimed to capture a repeated frequency and a great care and accuracy changes in growth, anthropometry, and also biological sample collection, right, from antenatal life with maternal blood samples, oral glucose tolerance tests, and through birth and into infancy, and as well as routine anthropometry included a number of very specialized measurements of skin folds, also of male reproductive phenotypes, here testicular descent. So, and also the samples of capillary blood spotted onto dried blood spot samples have provided a really valuable resource for repeated measurements of hormone levels and lipidomics measurements. So I'm just going to go through just some of the findings in relation to growth and metabolism. So one of the findings that we had was to identify the influences of maternal BMI and fasting glucose during pregnancy on the infant size at birth and postnatal growth. And we could do this to try and distinguish the influences of these two factors. And maternal BMI, independent of mother's glucose, seems to have a progressive effect on the infant size and the adiposity as infancy progresses. And this may be through shared environment and nutrition, or through the transmission of genetic factors. In contrast, the mother's glucose levels, independent of the mother's BMI, are well known to enhance the growth of the fetus in utero. And postnatally, this enhancement seems to then gradually fade and leading to a catch down in growth. Interestingly, in more modern era, Cambridge Baby Growth Study has shown that with better, tighter control of gestational diabetes, this initial fattening up of the infant is no longer seen. So on the left, and in red, in the more recent cohorts of infants born of mothers with gestational diabetes, no longer have that excess growth at birth. And yet, fascinatingly, you still see this deceleration in their growth rate in the early months, and indeed they remain smaller and thinner than other infants throughout life. And this has thrown up the idea that there may be inherent deficits in their insulin signaling, or maybe some other adverse nutritional environment in utero that hasn't yet been corrected by modern improvements in gestational diabetes management. In terms of infant feeding, studies have been able to show the role of timing of solids in childhood overweight and adiposity. So many earlier studies had linked early timing of solids to higher risk of obesity in childhood. But with the frequency of measurements in CBGS, we could show that actually the faster infancy weight gain and appetite actually precedes the onset of early solid introduction. And I said many other studies didn't have that sufficient characterization to show this temporal relationship. Findings such as this from CBGS have been cited or included in important national reports on infant feeding, such as this from Public Health England, which have highlighted the role of excess feeding and excess weight gain in infancy as a potential leading to childhood obesity. And as well as being highlighted in national reports, findings from CBGS have been highlighted in the national tabloids. So the Daily Mail headline that our study found that infants fed on formula milk cry less and are easier to get to sleep. Fortunately, behind this provocative headline, we had worked very hard in delivering the press release and disseminating it. And so we were delighted that the tabloids also recognized the scientific interpretation that irritability linked to breastfeeding is natural and not a sign of stress or even hunger. And therefore, parents need to be aware of this and supported to appropriately feed their babies. I guess it's not uncommon for research studies to make the national press. But this is indeed one of the only studies that I know that also been highlighted in one of the tabloid cartoons. I think this cartoon by Pew in the Daily Mail, I think it's absolutely brilliant. Makes you laugh, but it also hits the nail on the head in terms of the key message that being contented and following the optimal healthy lifestyle aren't necessarily the same thing. And it's true whether it's infants and formula milk or sugar-sweetened beverages in older children or beer in adults. As well as the role of the infant, we also recognize that the parents have an important role, and in this case, it's not the mother sitting on the bench, but it's these other carers of this baby here. And while hunger and satiety cues from the baby are important determinants, the response of the parent or carer is clearly also a key factor. And this was something highlighted in a subsequent baby milk trial that showed that many parents actually favor, are not just happy with overfeeding, but actually favor overfeeding and excess rates of weight gain in infancy, and that's supported by their families, their communities, and even some of their health professionals. So it's a message that needs to be corrected and guided. And one of the key sort of outputs of the Cambridge Baby Growth Study was the translation of these observations into a randomized control trial, which tested this the baby milk intervention to help educate and support parents to follow more optimal and healthy ways of infant feeding. The trial was successful in generating and reducing the amounts of formula milk intake by 10 to 15% across infancy, with larger differences at earlier ages where formula milk was the predominant source of nutrition. And this did translate to a modest, although significant effect on weight gain in those months. The Cambridge Baby Growth Study has spurned a number of follow-on studies. CBGS2 focused on small for gestational age and infants of gestational diabetic mothers. CBGS exclusively breastfed cohort is collecting really unique data using double labeled water to accurately assess breast milk intake. And throughout, I think that the studies, as well as generating many important outputs and impacts, have set up a platform and many resources for future work. I have to declare in blowing the trumpet for CBGS, declare personal conflicts of interest, and indeed very personal conflicts here in the study, providing very key valuable measurements for my own children. Actually, more importantly, I need to declare acknowledge the important contribution of the fabulous CBGS pediatric research nurses, Karen, Amy, Suzanne, and also Petra, who was there at the beginning of the study. And they have really picked up expertise in these measurements, have been flexible in learning new skills from PPOD, ultrasound, DEXA, labeled water techniques, and have shared that skill by training investigators on many other studies, including a national infant survey and the national cohorts. And their role was duly acknowledged last year in this prize at the annual Nursing and Midwifery and Allied Health Professionals Research into Practice Conference for their poster, which described the practical challenges and parental perspectives of undertaking such a study. And I think this is a particularly poignant award because it was given out just a few days before Carlo's passing. And for the substantial duration of CBGS, Carlo was their direct line manager and mentor. And as someone myself who has been the beneficiary of Carlo's supervision and mentorship during the later stages of my clinical training, really testify to his really great care, attention to rigorous training, but also a unique warmth and interest in the whole person. So thank you for your attention on